All right, and we are live for Absolute AppSec episode 13. I'm of course joined by the co-host Seth Law.
Hey everybody, welcome once again.
Oh, hold on. I did what I told hold on. I did exactly what I talked to Charles about before joining, which was left the sound on and I hit mute. Anyways, sorry. So, and we're joined by Charles Nwatu. Charles, please say hi.
Hey, everybody.
So Charles is in charge of security at Stitch Fix. He's worked at Twilio. He's worked at LinkedIn. He's worked in the federal space, Intel. Like Charles is going to talk. Obviously, he's going to talk about himself. We're gonna ask him more questions. But Charles basically comes with a lot of experience. We kind of want to get tonight his take on the challenges he faces, his philosophy to sort of building a security program. And so that's kind of going to be where we go tonight. So Charles, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you guys for having me. I really look forward to the conversation tonight.
Oh, so we definitely do as well. So, kind of the first thing we typically ask people is, if you could tell us a little bit about sort of your origin story, how you like came into security, sort of your arc,
Yeah, sure. So actually, I got into security while I was attending undergrad at the Pennsylvania State University. Go Lions. Very big Ten fan. So I went into school for like computer science, and at the time there was like a new program opening up called like Information Sciences and Technology, and I was like, oh, this seems pretty cool. So I decided to join into that. And then during my junior year, I think the NSA started like a program called the like Information Assurance Scholarship Program, IASP, and I signed up for that. And me and another cohort in my grade sort of won the initial offering for Penn State. And that was the first time when I got exposed to like incident response and like security. And I was like, whoa, like this is really cool, actually. Like the whole incident response and triage, malware analysis, reverse engineering, pen testing stuff like that was like way fun than developing applications and coding, like coding for applications, I would say. And then from there, I sort of just, as part of the obligation, I sort of spent my first 7 years of my career supporting the Department of Defense with the Defense Information Systems Agency, DISA, rolling out programs such as like HBSS, such as a host-based security system, and a whole bunch of other things. And then from there, just sort of matriculated into like McAfee and had a chance to come out west at LinkedIn and work on their security team with a great guy over there, Corey Scott. Had a chance to move to Twilio under the leadership of Miss Colleen Coolidge, and now sort of doing my own gig at Stitch Fix, trying to build out a security program and the challenges, the ups and downs, and the frustrations and the happiness that goes with that.
That's quite. I mean, that's quite a bit. You've worked with some good folks. Some good folks have worked with you. I mean, you've got a great background, and and honestly, it was kind of funny because we were talking before the podcast, and we kind of saw HBSS and the federal space and DISA, and it was just like brought me back. So that was kind of cool to chat about that kind of federal stuff a little bit.
Yeah, definitely different working in the federal space than, I would say working in startups and things of that nature.
Would you say, I mean, in terms of, okay, so it sounds like initially at Penn State, this is where you kind of fell in love with security in general. And obviously, there's, college is education, right? But I'm curious, this is something we always ask folks is, how much was taught to you and how much did you really have to like seek out on your own and teach yourself and to kind of develop as a security practitioner?
I would say it's a healthy blend. Like I think like university education was just good to sort of be around other like-minded people that were interested in that space, and having some, I say, professor at least guide you as in the overall thing. And then once I especially had the experience of working in federal, the experiences that I saw there like were just unparalleled. Like that was actually hands-on stuff that I could learn, do, and sort of take the practical and the philosophical aspects of it and sort of apply it like once I left the federal space. So that I think it's always a combination of, you know, of course, there's a personal drive and passion around security. As you hear many security people say, like it's almost like a lifestyle. It's a way of, you know, living your life, and I actually believe that it is, because there's so many different verticals and aspects within the security program that I don't believe that any one person is a specialty of everything, but there's so many niches that you can sort of fit yourself into and sort of like develop and sort of, I'll say, quote unquote, master to some degree in that particular space.
I've always wondered, so, you know, on that note is like, how do you, obviously there are certain traits, like you said, that this field is kind of, it's a part of you, right? It's not like a 9 to 5, right? Or you can turn it off. So, not to say that you know, you shouldn't disconnect, right? But how do you find the kind of person, like when you're interviewing or when you're going through the process of finding people, you know, in the security space, like what are some of the key attributes that tip you off that this might be the right person? What are you kind of looking for?
That's a great question. There are things that I look for in terms of problem solving. I look at security space as a curiosity space. You know, why do things perform or act the way they do? If I do this, what will happen to the thing that I'm either testing or evaluating? I'm always interested in people's curiosity about how they model a thing and how they deconstruct that thing, and what are the elements as to why they chose to deconstruct that thing the way they do.
Now,
Go ahead. Yeah.
no, I was going to say that's very interesting, right? I mean, I'm kind of the odd man out because I didn't necessarily like I've not done a lot in the government space, right? Most of my experiences come more on the financial side and then the consulting side of things and then tech startups. So like when you talk about finding those people, how do you feel like it went in, you know, in that government side as opposed to the startup side, since you've lived both of those lives?
Definitely different, because in the government side, of course, there's like a clearance process, so there's already a gating function to some degree.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason. My experience is that part of the reason why there was like the DoD Information Assurance Scholarship Program was to figure out a way to get the talent coming out of all these universities, you know, they say the brightest minds of the world, as they would say, and sort of catch them and sort of get them inside the government space to sort of help the government in terms of its information security practices and how to move forward. So I think just having that experience in a different space where I was sort of allowed to work with other peers that are coming out of undergrad and grad school to sort of figure out like what are the best principles that we should be doing within the DoD and the federal space when it comes to security, and knowing that working in the federal space is a grind. In startups, there's a lot of, you know, flexibility. You know, they say, you know, shipping code continuously and things of that nature.
Yeah.
My experience in federal is like, you know, there's things that you sort of plant as a seed, and you nurture and you water, you come back, you check the temperature. There are things that you do to make sure that this particular program or project actually blooms and blossoms into the beautiful flower you expect it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And in the startup space, like that flower you can go to the store and buy it. Like, like, so you can actually have it right then and there. So I think the difference is sort of in terms of pace and progress and expectation as to the deliverables, very, very different, but still satisfying on both fronts.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I have dealt with government or, you know, other agencies, it feels like the maturity is more defined, right? I mean, startup world can be anywhere from, hey, there's one guy in a corner who's doing everything, application security and network security and everything, to a full blown, you know, 10-person security team with product security and everything else built into it. But the government space seems to be more, because there are those gates, right? There is those restrictions that are involved. It does seem that the maturity level in general, I'm generalizing here, but in general is a little bit higher, even though the, you know, even though they may not be as progressive as the startup space. At least they're getting some of the basics right that the startup space may miss.
Yeah, I think overall, like I said, the unique experiences is mainly around like the basics and processes and procedures. Uh, I know some people say, "Oh, well, no, processes, slow people down," but there's a validity in having checkpoints. There's a validity in having processes and checklists. It's almost like a reminder as a safeguard as to how to think. Even the whole concept of just threat modeling your application and understanding the risk associated with an application, with the continuous deploy and continuous integration flow of applications. It sometimes can be challenging to do a threat model because you could literally sit down and do it one day, and by the time you come back 24 hours, it could be a completely different type of application with new different inputs and things of that nature. So there's always a balance between, I think, the federal space and what I've taken from the federal space and what I'm applying into the startup space. And it's been interesting. I have to say, like, my move out here to the West Coast has been interesting in sort of understanding how to take those principles of federal and apply them to the scrappiness of startup worlds.
And how have you found that tradition to, or how have you found acceptance, right, of those principles or whatever that you've taken from the government space? I mean, what do you feel like the startup world has taken, and what don't they accept too readily?
There's another good question. It's sort of challenging to sort of respond to that one, but I will say this at a high level is that I believe it's actually driven more on the startup side by the culture. In my experiences, where there's a high security culture, not just within the security team, but how that's echoed throughout the rest of the organization. Like, I truly believe in individuals and investing in individuals, not just in security, but across the organization, that if you make that like extension of trust and sort of build upon that, that people will generally want to do what is right. And like, I just like to say, hold me accountable as I hold you accountable, commit to me as I commit to you, and sort of work from there. So I think like one of the interesting challenges has been just getting that partnership. But once it's there, like once the risk is understood, like I sort of see the the grind is more of like the grind to sort of build it in. And when you start grinding, it's not in a negative way, but there's a lot of work. There's a lot of security narrative development. That's what I would say. Like developing the security narrative that it can be championed and sort of communicated across the organization. Like one of the things I preach at Stitch Fix now is that security is not just my team's responsibility, but security is the whole organization. In fact, that I run the largest security organization that I know of because of all the people within Stitch Fix. So that's the mindset shift that I sort of preach to people when it comes to like security adoption and my time here out in the Bay. And I have to say, like, so far, it's been with its challenges, but I'm committed to doing it in this approach.
Well, and this is a good time to start asking about what are the challenges in a modern, I mean, because, and I should say specifically in a modern shop or development workplace or however you want to say it. What are the modern challenges that people are facing, and then what was, as well as, your approach and your team's approach to solving some of those challenges. And you can get, please, get as high level or as low level as you want. We're interested.
I think I have this concept: do less better. I understand there's all these advanced and machine learning and analytics and stuff, but half the time, like, just do less better. Like, do you understand how authentication authorization happens within your platform if it's a web app, or your application if you're developing an application? Most of the things, I think, like the critical controls top 20, the SANS critical controls top 20 list, like just being able to do the basics better. Mike Johnson recently had a LinkedIn post where just talking about this, just doing the basics, password management for your employees, ensuring that you have proper like asset management, just knowing what you have, where you have it. Like, I do believe that if from a security infrastructure standpoint, if we're doing the basics well, the rest will come in line. In terms of like application development and secure coding, once again, basics of a framework. Like when you go outside of a programming language's framework to do things that are, I think, outside of that, there are challenges and inherent risk. And do you truly understand what those risks and challenges are? So I think, like I said, do less better. Keep it simple. Is the approach that I've just sort of been moving forward with security. The advanced machine learning, analytics, APT, all that nice little fun stuff. I believe it will come, but I want to focus on having a solid foundation. I just think that's where most of the energy and effort should be put across, whether it's your AppSec program or even your corporate infrastructure security program. Just do the basics.
Both Seth and I have a favorite quote from Ron Swanson: "Never half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing." It sounds similar to sort of your approach there.
Oh yeah, less is more.
So day one, what do you do, right?
So day one,
do less better, right? You've given us the SANS, critical security controls. What is the one thing you do, like when you walk into Stitch Fix for the first day, right? What is it that you started looking at?
Well, I'll say like my playbook as a whole. My playbook as a whole is basically baseline where things are at. And it's not really from a tooling perspective. The first step is really understanding like the individuals and the environment that you're working in, the engineers that you're working with, your infrastructure people that you're working with. It's really sort of building that that network of people within the organization. And then secondly, it's understanding what's the commitment that you're getting from the top down. So there's always like the grassroots bottom up approach, but also you need, I think, advocates within your management or your C level team members to sort of say like, we are invested in this particular capability of security, and what does this mean for us? I think from there, then you sort of go and sort of do a quick high level risk assessment. As you're learning how the organization works, what are the business impacts of the organization, identifying like what are key areas that you would like to target first. Of course, I think if you're on the web app side, you're going to do maybe a quick, web penetration test just to see like what's the baseline of the services. Are they doing secure coding principles right? Are they using their framework right? There are things that you can sort of get a glimpse as an external view before getting too deep dive inside the company, where you can sort of get an assessment and say, okay, at least I have a blueprint of what to do. So my first thing is normally just baselining what exists and what doesn't exist.
Okay.
Based on my experiences from previous organizations, from some of the teachings and learnings from my experience with LinkedIn with Corey Scott, and Twilio with Colleen Coolidge, and other places like that, is just taking that and sort of, and then putting in my government stuff, putting that all together and say, this is my playbook. Baseline, from the baseline, figure out what are the key areas you like to invest in, develop a roadmap strategy for those investments, and start there. And of course, you need to hire people. So I can't do it all by myself.
You would be surprised, right? How many organizations think that it can be done?
Yeah. That mindset sort of really has to change in terms of it just being like this one-off group, like this black box thing that says, oh, this is this bucket security that is terrifying and scary. I think as security practitioners, we tend to create some of that narrative ourselves, where I don't believe we create an inviting environment to allow people who may not know to come in and feel safe about displaying maybe their lack of understanding of security principles, and creating an environment that's healthy where they feel that they can discuss those things without fear of prejudice. So I actually think there's some work that we as security practitioners need to do in terms of how we develop that security narrative within our companies or our respective fields, and then sort of go from there.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I was going to ask, I mean, I have one big question, which is, I'm curious when it comes to philosophy. So basically, I mean, we see it time and time again. Panera Bread being the most recent compromise. It almost feels like, I mean, to me, it almost feels like there's no matter how much or what you do with security. Now, granted, like Panera Bread was kind of that was just
unique,
that was handled terribly, but
it's a good use case. It's a good use case of potentially of what you should and shouldn't do.
And that's what I wanted to ask. Like, do you kind of mentally say, okay, look, do you discuss with the C-suite and the execs and the higher ups? You say, hey, look, this is always a potential thing, so this is sort of how we prepare for it. You know, is it I mean, just, yeah, I would love to hear, is it like controls that reduce risk? Is it, I mean, how do you talk to folks about this, you know, in within your company, and prepare for the potential?
Yeah, so I would say overall, like prevention always fails. Like I think there's a saying that something, I don't know who said it, but it's been stuck in my head for a while. Like prevention always fails. So I'm a big believer in, can we develop capabilities that can increase our ability to detect and respond in a timely manner, and then can we track those metrics as a whole? So that's like my first case, and then second. Since we know that breaches happen, we have good evidence that breaches happen. Then the first case to me is like, well, we should have a breach response plan. I understand that in the moment, when you're doing a tabletop around a breach, it's very easy to say, okay, we're reading this case study and we're walking through this. But I still believe that having exposure and making sure that other people within the company, the key stakeholders, having exposure just to the process alone, not the technical aspect, but the non-technical. I believe in this day and age that if the technical aspects of a breach will get resolved, you're going to hire engineers, you're going to that's going to get handled. The thing I believe that needs more investment is around the non-technical aspect. How do you interface with your comms team? Does your comms team understand what mediums for which they're going to communicate on? How frequently will we communicate externally? If it's an external notification, do we understand what that looks like? Do we have, how do we communicate with our internal employees, and how frequently do we do that? How do we engage counsel? Who should engage counsel? Like I just finished, I'm in the process of working on developing that type of strategy for Stitch Fix, and it's an interesting dialogue for which I'm like, well, this would be a great talk to do. Is all right. So if the only thing you could do in one day is develop a breach response plan, I actually think that's a good first step. Because I want to venture and say you're not going to have an AppSec program after day one. You're
No.
probably not going to have like a cloud infrastructure security program after day one. But if you could only email your management team and your C team, like, look, these are the things we should at least have. If all hell breaks loose, break glass, pull fire alarm, like that's a first step that wasn't there yesterday. So I actually think that's a positive.
Yeah, that's so. I mean, honestly, that's awesome to hear that from you. To hear that sort of, because I mean, I have my own, like, obviously I'm biased to that. I think that everybody should be prepared, because I do think there's no. It just doesn't seem to matter how much it within. Okay, let me say this. I'm not saying that there's no value to. Obviously, we all believe and know that there's value in security. What I am saying, though, is that the value only gets you so far. There is still that little window, no matter how much you do, that there might be a breach. So then it goes back to it again. This is my opinion, that you just have to sort of like segment and control sort of what all gets breached. But it's really interesting to hear from you the concept of forward facing, internally and forward facing. How do we get that messaging put together? How are we communicating? And that's sort of like that's, to me, novel, because I haven't heard of folks kind of putting that together. That's kind of cool. That's a newer thing to me. I've heard of, like, getting like an incident response plan in place, but in terms of being prepared for legal counsel breach statements, things like that, that's.
Yeah, it was a challenge. It was challenging because the I just told myself, like, heaven forbid, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow and I could only leave one thing for the company, what would that be? And I said, if they knew how to communicate and talk to each other in a time of a security incident, I would be extremely happy, because, like I said, there's no way an AppSec program could be built in one day. There's no way that a cloud infrastructure security program can be built in one day. But if there's a checklist or roadmap that they could at least follow that gets them down the path, and there's like, you can demonstrate trust while you're doing that process, like, to me, that's just at least reassuring.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have something that you can call back on. I mean, you're absolutely right. I never necessarily thought about it in that way, right? I always went in with kind of the whole idea of the gap analysis, right? What you were talking about is baselining, but actually giving them something straight out of the gate like that, It was interesting. We just had Hack West here in Salt Lake City, and one of the keynotes was Dawn Marie Hutchinson from Optiv,
Mhm.
and that's all she talked about was breaches. Right. That's all, like most of her work is going in and advising CISOs on breaches, and having the plan of who's going to talk to the media is a way bigger issue than how you technically fix the breach. Right.
Yep.
Because it affects the bottom line. If you go out and say, hey, we lost your record or whatever, we lost your credit card, that you're admitting to damages against some person, and you're going to have to make them right. Yeah. So that's a good way to think of it, though, right? Is what can you do today to actually hand to your company that's going to make a difference? That is something that would do it.
Yeah, something different.
Yeah, no, it's good. That's exactly why we have these discussions, right? Ken and I have been mired in product security, application security for a number of years, right? And we don't always get up to that level. Yeah, we kind of manage some things at a consulting company, but it was always very code focused. And it's good to take a step back and actually look at the different aspects of security that we don't necessarily always think about, right?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely love. I think the AppSec space to me is very intriguing because, as like a, I don't like saying incident response, but I like to say like detection engineer, because as like a detection engineer, I look at application security professionals as like, hey, you guys should be laying like triggers. And as a like, detection engineer, I want to consume the triggers that you deploy inside applications as a way for us to better, like I said, better detect, so that if something does go wonk in the dark, that we can identify it quicker, minimize the risk, minimize blast radius, as people would say, and have like a response plan on how to tactically address that particular like issue or vulnerability or exploit happening. So I really see all the security functions sort of fitting together like as a web, and sometimes it can get tangled, but we do our best to sort of like be very like explicit in our communication with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Has
So
any?
how do you foster that? Sorry, Ken.
No. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Yeah.
So I mean, obviously, you're at Stitch Fix, you're running security there, you've got people on board. How do you foster that sort of communication and that sort of camaraderie, right? I mean, it's easy to walk into an organization that already has that figured out, but what have you done, and kind of what are your hints to building that sort of a program?
So I think some of that feeling that of that camaraderie actually comes from my time being in the DoD and in the federal space and supporting the different COCOMs that exist.
So you were always under fire, and that was it, right?
Well, it wasn't that you had to be. It's just the idea that we are all committed to each other to either solve this problem come hell or high water. Like that level of intensity is what I've tried to build in all of my IR teams that I've managed. And as a security program, what I'm looking to do is, and I mean this heavily, that I am asking people to commit to doing the right thing. Like I want their behavior to demonstrate that we are either doing the right thing. Because then at a level, then it becomes a psychological thing where I'm asking myself, am I doing the right thing at this point in time? I understand I got to ship code. I understand I got to do like send something out, but how can I change behavior to demonstrate that we are doing security well? And how can I demonstrate that through some form of I know the next step is like metrics, because I do believe that you have to show that there's growth happening. But I want to challenge people at the individual level and at an organization level to create an environment where we are not just talking about security, we're being actionable about security, and we're holding each other accountable by being committed to security.
That makes sense, right? So if you're asking someone to commit to that, right? Is that part of your interview process? Right? Is that how is it that you are instilling that into people, or getting that buy-in?
So, pardon me, I just straight up ask. Like, like,
no, be honest, right? Be straightforward with people.
Yeah.
This is what we expect for sure.
Yeah, I we are all professionals in our working environments. We are all adults, supposedly, in our working environments. And the way I just look at it is I just ask straight up. And that if your behavior does not demonstrate that, then that's when there has to be a conversation about, okay, like, what do we do here? Um, I just believe in just being very transparent with people. That's my personal ethos, is just being very transparent with people and just saying, hey, like, this is what it is. Yes, it could be painful. Yes, it could be challenging, but I'd rather have the tough and difficult conversations. And if we disagree, that's fine. I just want to be able to express and understand, like, where you're coming from, where I'm coming from, and how does this uh, impact us as a company. I think as security professionals, like, we're trust custodians. We're in the business of building trust. Security is just the action as how we do that. Like, at the end of the day, we are expecting people to trust what we do, trust what we say, and that's only evident by the things that we do and how transparent we choose to be with those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I would agree with that, right? Because that's the whole idea is, as a security person, you typically aren't the one that's running the network. You're not building the applications. You're walking in and saying, hey, why don't we do this? And if they don't trust you, if they don't have some sort of some level of expectation that that expertise is correct, you're never going to get anything done.
Yeah, which goes back to that whole security narrative thing. I think one of the biggest things I've learned within the past 2 years is developing a security narrative that is easily consumable by anyone. And it takes time to craft that security narrative for wherever organization that you're in. And it's something that I'm continuously doing, because as I learn more, I want to refine it more. And I think as I've gotten better with it, as one of my coworkers told me, Charles, you're winning the hearts and minds of the people. So I take that very personally, to sort of show that security is not this scary thing.
Yeah.
That it can be, like, everyone has a place within this journey, and it's just making sure that as a security team, we either provide services that help with that, that's very transparent, or we're communicating and doing training and education around those things, so that it's just inviting.
Cool. Good. Ken, you had a question and I interrupted.
No, I was just going to ask, it's kind of a little different. I was just curious, in terms of, because, I think all three of us on this call have been around for a while. That's a nice way of saying we're a bunch of old farts, but no, but on a serious note, from a technical perspective, what has gotten easier? What has made things more difficult for you? I know that's kind of a out of the left field kind of question, but
I would say, actually, what's easier, like, I'm going to talk about from, like, an incident response side. I actually think, like, AWS environments, or cloud security, cloud infrastructure environments, with all the APIs that you get in these infrastructures, you can do a lot of things right off the get-go. Like, there are things that are inherently part of, like, the AWS security trust model, Google Cloud Platform trust model. Like, if you do those things, man, you are farther along than most, I would say, like, traditional enterprises could be in terms of identity and access management, things of that nature. And then also logging of that with the things of, like, AWS CloudTrail and the like. I just think that has moved that up front faster. What has become challenging is the fact that, well, you have AWS, and if you're not properly doing those things right, you can shoot yourself in the foot, as evident with all the, like, the types of S3 bucket stuff that's been happening. So it's like, it's great if you do it right, but if you do it wrong, it's very evident real quick, like, what could happen, like loss of access management keys and things of that nature. So I am actually surprised about the cloud infrastructure. Like, at first, I'm going to, like, a little cautious about it, but the more I've engaged in it, I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. This is great. But you have to follow the safeguards that exist within these platforms.
Well, and I'd love to have at some point Evan Johnson on to talk about but to your point, what he built and what his team built at Segment was as a essentially the goal is to have no access keys, right? One of the biggest issues with AWS is those, like you said, those AWS access keys getting out there, and then or S3 buckets being open. But their goal was to, like, AWS access keys, IDs and secrets. We don't use those anymore, and so they went to a completely kind of like federated.
Role base, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was pretty.
Or keyless infrastructure.
Yes, keyless infrastructure. So I mean, it's like what you said. There is this notion that because it's so powerful and because it offers a rich API and because there are so many features, you can most people, I think, it's pretty common for people to focus on the negative, but like there are those aspects of like, yeah, but you can also make it super secure, and you can, there's a lot you can do in terms of visibility, in terms of hardening, in terms of restoration. That it can be your friend, basically. It can work for you.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges though is actually finding talent that understands, or finding resources that actually understand how to do that within any.
Did we lose him?
Oh, I think I hear you.
There you go. You're back.
Sorry. Like I said, I was saying one of the challenges is just finding talent. I know information security is tough as a whole, but finding cloud infrastructure security engineers on top of AppSec people, on top of security monitoring IR people, and then on top of that, trying to maintain a level of diversity within that whole pipeline is also challenging. So I think it goes both ways. Like, it's great that we have these things, but we also need exposure to get people trained up on these platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I know that AWS security has or AWS has a security cert now, but it's it's new technology that people have to adapt to learn, and that's the interesting thing too that we don't often talk about is that, like, in security there are these things where it's a new technology, and then we have to get familiar with this technology. I'd argue at times more so than even the people using it, because we have to figure out all the pitfalls, the unseen pitfalls, the things that can go wrong. We have to really know that stack inside and out for us to then make assumptions, or not assumptions, to put together some strategy around securing it, some policies, what have you. So, yeah, new technology is always an interesting one, and the cloud's really interesting. I did want to point out, by the way, first of all, Evan Johnson, who we were just talking about, he said hi. He's in chat, and he had a question, and it was he's curious to hear the tricks of the trade for moving security basics forward at a startup. Let's see. It's sounds good to talk about. So basically, he's seen in the past, and I think we've all seen it. Teams have issues with the basics, and I'm not as sure what the basics means. I'm not sure if that means like, oh gosh, one second. I got a new phone, and now Siri just turned herself on, which is a whole other thing, by the way.
Siri.
Is Siri listening? Hey, Siri.
Siri got headphones on. So.
Siri, call mom.
Won't call mom. Oh,
So you mentioned what are those? You were talking about what are those basics, right? Like,
right. What are those basics?
There are different verticals. So within those verticals of security and in your infrastructure, there are different basics. I say. I believe that you need to at least identify what you have in order to understand what you need to protect, and what you need to sort of have a threat assessment against and a threat model against in terms of like corporate infrastructure security. One of the use cases that was thrown to me before was like, well, we have people that lose our laptops. Okay, but it happens. And then it said, well, I think that's someone told me that's a low risk. Well, I said, well, what if that laptop didn't have like full disk encryption? And what if that laptop belonged to, let's say, our comptroller? This is our financial comptroller. Does that mean it's still a low risk at that point? No. Like, to me, I would say, yeah, I would beg to say that it's a little bit different. But then again, it's being open to thinking that as a prevention mechanism, when prevention sort of does fail, how do you quickly do your triage through detection to determine the level of effort that you need to put into solving said challenge? So I do believe in just asset inventory, asset management. I do believe in patching makes a difference. I do believe that enterprise password management for your end users is something that companies should offer. It's like these are my personal opinions about that. Because the things that we can make easy and available for our end users, once again, goes into demonstrating the behavior of being trustworthy.
Okay. I was just trying to digest that.
Hit back at me.
I mean, making it easy, right? And I think that's what Evan's asking is how do you do that, right? I mean, it's one thing to kind of talk about it, and I think you hit on it earlier. Hiring is a big deal, right? Being
Yeah.
upfront with people, being upfront with what you expect of them when they join the team, and communication.
Yeah, so that goes both for the team members you hire and for the company as a whole. Like one of the things I've done at Citrix is basically present to our entire company about how our security will be and how that they are, like I said, part of this process. And something that just from personal experiences, going back to hiring is like getting people that can help leverage across the organization. I look for communication skills as a big component of being a security practitioner, but I also look at how individuals can develop solutions, create solutions, or integrate with teams that sort of leverages their understanding and does that as a force multiplier for the rest of the organization. Like I should be able to say, hey, I'm going to deploy you into this group. And by the time, let's say 2 month, 3 month engagement within this group, within this company, like there's an expectation that you have either sort of developed or fostered capabilities that allows this team to sort of pseudo independently function by themselves. Like you just check in every so often to ensure that they are still in alignment, but you're developing things that sort of act as guardrails. Like when you go bowling, they got the inflatable things. You
I don't know
bounce
what you're
off.
talking about. No.
They have the little guardrails, and you do your bowling. You can bounce off of them, but you're still on the track going forward.
Yes.
Like that's the goal, is to sort of continuing to guide teams to move forward, but in a secure and if possible a transparent way that's unbeknownst to them. But if they're willing to know what that is, you can pull back the curtains and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Like I'm big on that too.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that there's a component of the security team that you're looking at as more of a marketing effort, almost internally and externally, right? Hey,
Definitely.
we're marketing ourselves as a trust agent, and we're marketing the tools and processes. So if I send you as a security professional into the DevOps team, I'm expecting you to bring their level up and market us or market security to them, so it becomes a part of their process. Is that correct?
Yes. Like I know my goal at the end of the day is actually to make myself irrelevant with regards to security. And that goes back to the fact that if security is open and available to all, it should just become another, I don't say a checkbox, but just more of an oversight with the data that we can collect, the metrics that we define, the capabilities that we develop and invest in, where that it's actually integrated across the team. Now, that's like the sky and the pie, like that's the end state. But I know there's a lot of work that has to be done in order to get to that point, and that's where I'm at right now. Is just like let's get the talent on board, let's figure out our roadmap moving forward, and let's determine what we want to capture to demonstrate that the investments that we're doing, the capabilities we're developing and investing in, are actually making a difference. And that's yet to come.
That's one thing you're always working on, right? Is measuring exactly what you're doing and representing that to the board or whoever, right? The upper management. So where this is an AppSec podcast, obviously that's Ken and I's background, right? What are you doing at Stitch Fix from that perspective? Like, how are you building out your application security team, and how do you view that as different? Say your network security or your cloud security team. I mean, AppSec cloud security could go hand in hand, but give us a little bit of a rundown there.
So I would say, just taking a step back, that from an application security team perspective, my philosophy once again is uh, we have assessments in place. Is having this new team that literally just started this week to sort of build up their understanding of the business, and then sort of like if there's hemorrhaging things and we're bleeding, of course we're going to address those things in time accordingly fashion. But is to have them sort of get an idea of like where should we start investing our time at. I want to give them the due diligence to sort of do their own inspection and assessment. Like they are the subject matter experts in this space. The culture that we have in our environment is very open to doing uh, like security related efforts. It's just as with everything, you just gotta get prioritized. Just has to, like I said, the grind. You gotta repeat that grind over and over again. Get the security narrative over and over again. But I don't see it my program being too different at this point in time. I think it's just getting an understanding of our space and our environment, and then being somewhat tactical and programmatic in terms of strategy of how we want to resolve these things. Of course, you have like your SDLC stuff. There's things that are just inherently a part of like secure development and coding and things of that nature that you just want to address. But maybe there's something very, very tactical that we can do and demonstrate why we're doing this and how it fits into our secure development lifecycle and training program. And then the toolings that will come with that as part of the organization. So right now we are sort of developing what that roadmap will be, but we know it's probably going to be somewhat traditional as we start off until we get sort of a good idea from what our baseline assessments look like and where we look to like develop capabilities and move forward in.
Cool. Yeah, it's all. I mean, it's always interesting to see, right? Obviously the approach is kind of a standard one that we see in multiple organizations, right? Is, hey, where are we at? What do we look like from an OWASP top 10 perspective? In the SDLC, are we doing dynamic analysis, static analysis? Yep. And then where are our gaps? Where can we push more into training or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in your thoughts. Like, I'm seeing more AppSec developers wanting to not just do like I call it like the vulnerability research aspect, like finding the stuff, but I'm also starting to find some people that are coming from like the software side that would love to learn how to fix the stuff. Yeah. So my previous gigs, I've been successful having a blend of like software engineers that want to do like security fixes, like learn how to do security and develop security tooling, and then also having like AppSec vulnerability researchers sort of help find this stuff, but may not have the strongest programming skill sets, but are willing to learn. So I've sort of been like doing like blending and pairing individuals of those types of mindsets together. Like, okay, you guys are buddies, or you two are buddies that are going to sort of solve this together, because it's interesting to see that. There's developers that are truly interested in security, but like I said, the barrier may be daunting to them. And then there's vulnerability researchers and AppSec pen testers that like, are great at finding stuff, may at a high level know how to fix it, but may resign themselves from actually doing it within the code themselves.
Yeah. I mean, we've always, well, I mean, me personally, I've always stuck to my guns on the best application security people are developers, right? They may not be the best at finding a vulnerability, right? But it kind of comes from my background in development as well, is understanding how to build the application gives you a lot of power in how to actually break it, right? You understand where all those edge cases are, but then you also understand how to fix it, and you can talk the developer's language. As far as integrating the two together, it's kind of an interesting problem, right? I mean, traditionally, what you have is more of the pen testers or the vulnerability researchers, right, on the security team, and then in the organizations where I've seen it work very well, they identify developers that are security conscious, and those are the guys that the vulnerability researchers go to, right? So, hey, I find a vulnerability. I'm going to tell the one guy on the team that gets excited about it, and he's the one that's going to rip the code apart, be that a Ken or somebody else, right? But rip the code apart, figure out why it's happening, and then actually implement the fix. If you can find somebody that can do both of them, hey, you found a diamond, and you got to keep a hold of them, right? But
definitely.
Yeah. but the whole idea is, actually having those two different skill sets to complement each other. I think we're talking the same language there.
Yeah, I think you brought up a great point because you said as a developer, you understand your code. It gives you the ability to understand how to break your code better. And something that I remember picking up at my time at LinkedIn and work with Corey Scott was like, as a developer, there's a thing of craftsmanship around your code and the quality of your code. And if you're an engineer developing code, that security is part of your craftsmanship. Like you just don't develop code without thinking about these types of things. Like if you call yourself a developer or a programmer and you're not thinking about security, then are you really doing your craft the justice? And that's part of the you're talking about the how do I get people on this journey with me. So I sort of I'm transparent to that nature. Like, well, you call yourself a developer or programmer. So as you're maturing through senior staff, principal, et cetera, like how does that demonstrate in your security understanding? Like I just challenge people at that level.
Yeah, I mean, Netflix talked, or Jason Chan from Netflix, reInvent 2017 had talked about, they built this dashboard, and it was effectively a scorecard of all of the applications that mattered, I believe, being, front facing. And because of the pride in their craftsmanship, and because of the just the general kind of culture, peer pressure, etc., you don't want to have the D or the F or even the C on that scorecard, and it's visible to everybody. So it was a good way, apparently, from what Jason had said, for them to not to embarrass, but to say, hey, here's some awareness around like applications that are maybe not meeting the spec, and then people can start throwing in pull requests or code changes to tighten that stuff up. So more to get people involved in fixing and improving, and people did it because they took pride in their work.
Yeah, and I almost feel like there's an education aspect to that, right? If we go back to the things that you can do to really affect security, right? Actually training your developers in a good way on security is, that's where you've got to start. If you look at you got some information security or information assurance experience in college. I didn't, right? By any stretch. If we even talked about security, it was about crypto or something random like that. It had nothing to do with like internet security, buffer overflows, or anything like that. Granted, I am dating myself because that's the only thing that they talked about security wise back then. But in spite of that, what I'm saying is that there's not a lot of programs out there on the university level that really address security in a way that we would find adequate, right? So, you pull somebody that's only got a couple of years of coding experience under their belt, they most likely don't know what SQL injection or cross-site scripting is, or if they do, they have a very, very shallow understanding of it, right?
Yeah, and I guess that comes with part of the uplift.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to figure out a way to bring them up to a level that you need them to be at. It's a difficult proposition. Are you doing something like that with Stitch Fix? What does your security training program look like for developers?
Well, I say like in general, like the security program and training in general. What I've normally looked at is, um, I have this concept of just in time training. Like, um, if they're deploying code and we're using our automated CI/CD, like if there's failures, I want them to be able to understand like why those failures are happening and what that failure is, why it is, and what would you need to do in the future to prevent it. Almost like on demand at that point in time. Then you have your traditional training where like, hey, we're going to either have a lunch and learn or we're going to have some type of third-party application vendor to come and do some like custom-based training. But I'm looking at solution sets that sort of do that just in time. Hey, this failed in your build. You want to know why? Click here type of concept. I want to engage the developer where they're at. Like that's my thing. If I can engage the developer where they're most comfortable, where they're normally working at, then I think that will help sort of like a better engagement model for developers and other practitioners.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it goes back to pride of craftsmanship as well, right?
We're
Wow.
all struggling with that
I'm having
today,
a tea over
except for Charles. He's got it nailed, but the rest.
craftsmanship. There we go. I got it. Goes back to pride of that thing as well, right? I mean, no developer wants to write crappy code. They don't want to write code that costs the company money, or is harder to maintain, or is insecure. So teaching them the right way to do it. Like, I like that just-in-time training, or the real-time training aspect. I feel like we try to do that, from a consulting perspective. We try to do that in the reports, right? Hey, here's all this background information on cross-site scripting, but I guarantee you that 90% of those findings that I've written have never even been read, right? The descriptions and the background, all they do is they jump straight to the, hey, how did this happen and how do I fix it?
Yep. And I think like it's a disservice that we're doing. And once again, like, how do we engage them where they're at? My wife always has this saying, meet people with grace. Like, and that's how I take my security focus. Like, meet people where they're at, understand where they're coming from, and how do I get them along on this journey? And once again, it goes back to the security narrative. So my belief is, if I meet people where they're at, I give them the security narrative, and I bring them along on the journey. Hopefully, then they will spread that gospel to the rest of the people, and we sort of go from there. But it's an exciting endeavor and journey to go through. Uh, I I'm not sure I'd recommend everyone being like a head of a security program, but there's a lot of pains and growth that go with it. But it's truly a humbling experience to sort of like bring people along on that journey, and it's very, very exciting.
I did want to mention because we're having, so I've got there's a couple other Slack channels. We've got a Slack channel for basically what I'm trying to say is that we've got a couple Slack channels that both Seth and I are part of. We've got one dedicated absolute AppSec. I did invite you, Charles. It's a newer thing, and we're still trying to get it set up, so it's not really what we're using. Having said that, people are having some issues with YouTube chat. So if there are questions you want to get in, email us at absoluteappsec@gmail.com. That's absoluteappsec@gmail.com. We'll get you an invite to Slack, since we haven't set it up to sign up yet. And then also you can just email a question as well, because we're going to be on here for another few minutes. So, feel free to email those. I apologize. It's just, we've got this, like, YouTube is not the easiest to work with. So,
Hey, something else I wanted to bring up. Like, we mentioned security in terms of like developer centric, and one of the things I'm being very explicit about is that security actually is more than just developers. I understand developers write code, but there's also security with how your finance team engages with data sets and how do they transfer that information intercompany and external, and if you have marketing teams, how do they handle sensitive data sets internally within the company and external. Like, once again, it's really I would say, from my experience, for security practitioners to fall into what they feel comfortable with, and being comfortable with is engineers and developers. But from an organizational standpoint, there is risk and security concerns that across more than just the traditional engineering development boundaries that fall into your HRIT systems, that fall into your IT infrastructure, that falls into your finance and whatever other components that fits your particular industry. So that's something I just like want to call out, that security, like I said, it is cross-cutting.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's your approach for managing that risk, right? I mean, I know there's a lot of companies that do. I mean, we've talked about bug bounties a few times, right? Is like open season on anything that's related to our domain. You let us know and we pay you for it. But what is your approach when you want to manage that risk and you want to eliminate it or mitigate it?
So manage it. Well, in order to manage the risk, I need to understand what it is. And once again, I think the baselining within those particular environments, whether it's your IT and understanding all the SaaS applications that you may have in an environment, and do you understand what data is going into those SaaS applications, is one step. In your HRIT systems, have you evaluated the software that they're using and ensuring that the proper safeguards are in place there? Same with your financial systems and things of that nature. It still, to me, steps back, starts with, do I have an accurate assessment of where I'm at? And do I understand where I'm at? And can I articulate where I'm going? And once I articulate where I'm going, can I actually hire and actually do projects and develop capabilities that either mitigate, transfer, reduce the risk? Um, it's a large undertaking, because most of the times my experience is that engineering sometimes focus, like security just focuses on the engineering and developer aspect of it, but there's this whole other side of the business that like the biz ops world that needs a TLC also, and how do you sort of have security practitioners welcome that world into their space and be welcomed in that space. And I'm not sure if we are having those types of conversations with those types of with people of those backgrounds to understand the pains and the challenges that they may be experiencing.
Yeah, yeah. Realistically, I think about it. Right, some of my first gigs, dealing with security, it was a lot of, identifying. Hey, guess what? We have marketing that's standing up all of this stuff all the time, and we give them customer lists, and they're posting them to, they're posting them spreadsheets to random places, right? And you know, getting your mind around that or your hands around it, and then asking them to actually follow a process that may take them 5 minutes longer is a difficult thing to do, right? It just is, because they've got their deadlines, they've got everything else they're dealing with. And, having to meet in the middle on a lot of that is difficult, is hard.
Oh yeah, and definitely just asking them about their experiences with security from a marketing standpoint. Some of them will say, I haven't had to, or no one's ever asked me, and you're just like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, yeah. So once again, is that narrative is like, okay, then I'm meeting you where you're at. I'm going to know, how do I engage you so I can bring you on this journey, and then let's go.
Cool. That's a really good point, right? Is, we do get very siloed, and it is definitely because we have our niche that we find, right? And we don't necessarily always think outside of that, but it is a good exercise to do that. Just like it is that, the breach plan, thinking about that, because it doesn't necessarily always just touch the engineers, it touches everybody else.
Well, and it's probably not a bad idea, considering with DevOps, how much of AppSec and Ops are sort of working. Security, SecOps and AppSec kind of have to work together now. So silos are certainly, from a technical as well as cultural standpoint, they kind of have to break down there. So I did want to shift gears since we're a little over an hour now. So basically, I did want to recap just real quick a little bit from, and again, if you have questions, okay, I see something popped in. So we got some questions. I'm about to get to that. I did want to recap from last week at LocoMocoSec. Some of the things that Charles is talking about, I saw those same, like Troy Hunt did a keynote, and it was a lot of the same sort of philosophy, and a lot of the same sort of I think that the talk was something like, you're pwned, I'm pwned, we're all pwned, or something along those lines. And so there were some pretty interesting things in that. At some points it was like, well, XSS just doesn't seem to want to go away. There was Dr. Mario who talked about that from Cure 53. So there were some interesting things. But Charles and I share a mutual friend, Justin Collins. One thing that was really cool and unique about LocoMocoSec that I did want to point out, and Charles and I had discussed it. We definitely want to chat about it a little bit. Justin basically sponsored a as well as LocoMocoSec. They put together a diversity sponsor. Basically, MocoSec, they paid for their hotel airfare, and the goal being for folks who may have not had the opportunity to get exposure to like an AppSec conference could come out. And of course, like if you're going to come out to an AppSec conference like Hawaii, you really can't do much better. So, but that was definitely something I know, Charles, you talked about wanting to kind of discuss tonight, and we've talked about it before on this podcast. We'd like to promote certainly more diversity in the AppSec field. So there's a couple questions coming in through. So please give us your insight there, and then we'll get to some of these questions before we wrap up. There's a couple that have come in. So
Yeah, definitely. So like I have a personal interest in uplifting the underrepresented minorities within information security as a whole. It's near and dear to my heart. Like it's something that impacts me daily. I have had experiences that have shaped the reason why I am who I am because of even my engagement in the security community. And with that being said, one of the challenging parts is how do we create, like I mentioned before, a space where the barriers of entry to security is open. And I have to say, like Marcus from Threat Care has been one of my mentors, and I think he's just tremendously awesome or with around providing guidance as to how to do that. One of the unique things I would have to say about the security space is if you get on Twitter and you ask a question, you'd be surprised how many people will come up and give you the answer. It's just like getting over that initial fear of like just ask. Like there's enough people within the security space that are willing, and I believe want to ultimately see a diverse community. Because with diverse communities, you get diverse thought, you get diverse actions, and things of that nature. So I am all for advocating for diversity within security. I am doing my part in terms of being able to hire a diverse team and expose people to the different paths that exist within security, whether it's through volunteers that I do. So I'm definitely big on ensuring that there's access and there's actual representation when it comes to diversity in information security field. So you won't get any pushback from me on that. That's something I live, breathe, and live every day.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's one of those things where like, because I don't. There's younger folks who come into the industry and like we seem probably semi-professional or whatever, but when I got into hacking, it was called hacking. There was not an industry, and it was basically like, love fucking anarchy, right? Like that's what it was. And back to kind of that time, like, which wasn't that long ago, but I mean, it was probably 13, 14 years ago when, I started myself getting into this. It was like, it was about who you were. It was about all these different opinions, all these unique people. And the one thing we had in common was that we all loved hacking. We all loved breaking into stuff. That was what we loved. And, I think it's important. I mean, it's kind of what you've just said. I think it's important for those. It is what you said. It is important for all these different opinions and all these different personalities to help shape this culture and to keep it growing and evolving. And so, like I said, I think it's great when someone like, Justin Collins, Brakeman Pro actually put money where their mouth is on the and help out in that regard.
Yeah, so. Definitely. Justin, great friend. Really exciting guy.
Well, and on that note, someone, so Cece had said to you this. She said that I believe it's she. Loved your tweets about inclusion and your support for female engineers in InfoSec. There's a question there, but I wanted to point out that was something that was thrown out there to you. A thank you, or a positive statement. And then there's a few questions here.
All right.
One is, what do you think about certifications, but more specifically the offensive security certified pen tester?
I'm all for certifications. The reason why is, once again, even from a diverse standpoint, people get into security from different angles. It's whether it's through formal education through university, or it's like a side hustle that, hey, they're intrigued, or it's like they came out of university with a different degree and said, hey, I stumbled into this thing called security. So why is it me to limit how another person goes about obtaining knowledge? If you can demonstrate that you have the knowledge, and if you did it through whether it's a certification route or education route or self-taught through YouTube videos or pen tester labs or whatever the platform is. Shoot, go do it. I'm an advocate for insatiable learning. Like one of the things that I sort of preach within the teams I've managed in the past is there will be time for documentation and learning. Like if we can't lean on each other to learn from each other, then we're failing each other. So I'm very, very big on whatever means that you know how to learn it. Like I know for me, I'm a reader. I love to read. Once I read it, then I go and try to apply it. Some people, they can see something one time, they got it. So we all learn differently, which once again is just a diverse thought set, and just sort of go from there. So I'm big on certs. I'm big on education. I'm big on whatever makes sense for you as the learner.
Yeah, I don't have the attention span to listen to a teacher. You know, some people, like you said, they can sit there for an hour or two, listen to somebody, an instructor, and that's actually better for them. And for me, I lose track after like 2 minutes. Just give me the book and the hardware or the software and like get cracking. So everybody's different in how they learn. The follow-up to that question was, what would you recommend in terms of training, certifications, whatever, what have you, to start in web application security specifically?
For the web, for the web app side, I know that you're the SANS courses. I can't remember the SANS certification, but SANS is an investment. I do like I think you mentioned, was it the offensive the OSCP?
The OSCP, yeah.
Yeah, I do think that's a very interesting certification. I believe there's was it pentesterlab.com has some very, very great like tutorials, and their paid model is not so bad either. So there's many places where I think you can get an introduction into the web app space, and sort of go from there. And there's also the GitHub awesome list. I know there's like the AppSec awesome list of things of all the curated like
Yeah,
GitHub
I'm searching
repos.
for it.
Yeah, it's that thing is like it's a living, breathing testament as to the investment as security professionals we do to make sure that people are informed. So it's great.
Yeah, Paragoni. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but here's the link. I'm going to put it into live chat for everybody so that they. But yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, you know, I'll add to that too. In that, like, and I know Seth is the same way. If you're talking about just starting out in web AppSec, and this probably applies to security in general, like when you see something like someone get the OSCP or the not just that, but like they've gone and they've done they've volunteered as like at the CTF team for a conference, or they've gone and done CCDC, or they've done some open source contribution and some blogging. We've talked about this before. Like when you combine like a certification that's really hard to get, like the OSCP, and then you've got your your involvement and activities that you can point to outside that. That's like it comes down to like, okay, pretty much what Charles said in the beginning, which was, how do you think? Now I just want to know how you think and a little bit more about who you are, because you've already proven that this is something you're serious about. And so that's enough, I think, to get started.
Yeah, you can't teach passion. Like you either have it or you don't.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was going to add to that is, right, that, once you do get a little bit of experience or you want to try that out, right, nowadays with the bug bounties that are out there, you can go try it. You may not find things, because a lot of that low-hanging fruit gets picked up pretty quick, but at least you have live environments that you can test against. Right? When we were coming up, that was all very gray. You could spin up your app or stay on your network, but the amount of diversity that's there from a strict language and app perspective is pretty low in comparison to the wider internet. So utilize those as well.
And anything to add before I continue on? Because there's a couple more questions here.
Yeah, let's hit the questions, man.
Awesome. So what are the 3 top skills for your incident response team?
I would say number 1 is communication. Number 2, communication. Number 3, communication. I really do believe that when incidents happen, like I see incident commanders as people that sort of rally people to sort of say like, hey, stay calm, cool, collected. Let's not have any cowboy, riding off, people doing whatever they see fit. It has to be a coordinated response where there is a control center that people come in, they check in, tasks are divvied up. You understand how to do the triage. You understand how the triage impacts the business. Like there is basically a command where there's a trade-off given. You understand what those trade-offs are. I believe that communicating and understanding that to the stakeholders for which you'd be working with within an incident is imperative. And depending on also the vertical that you're in some cases, people may want skill sets of reverse engineering and things of that nature. Like I think there's enough commodity software out there that you can get enough of that, but I look more on how does an individual coordinate and maintain a level head when the fire is all around them, like that this is fine little, I don't know, cartoon strip where that little doggy or whatever is sitting and everything is burning around them. Like there's some people that can just say cool and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And when those types of individuals speak, like they're heard and people respond to them in a manner where we know that they're going to be efficient, they're going to be understood, and they're actually going to be acted upon. Like I look for that understanding a lot. Like I said, the technical stuff will always get done. Like I don't doubt technical capability nowadays. Either you do it, you know it, or you don't. Like it's very, very cut and dry to me.
Yeah, soft skills are important, whether it's consulting to a company or working for a company. I mean, those types of things, like soft skills can't be, I mean, there's, it can't be understated how important soft skills really are. And because you see a bunch of people that are super smart and there are definitely areas where it's fine. Like you could be a researcher, there are a few places where it's totally fine to like have no real people skills to speak of, but for the most part, you're still, you can't like, oh, I'm technical, so I don't get people, I don't have to try and fit in. Like, no, you have to get along with people. And so like everything you've been saying is pretty much like give to market your team, yourself, your goals to other people. So having soft skills help.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing. So like understanding logging infrastructures and being able to parse data sets. Like I just think that as an incident response or security monitoring and detection engineer, that understanding how to look at data, visualize data to tell a story, once again going back to narratives, is once again influential and important. The whole things around incidents is basically you have puzzle pieces and you're trying to put some form of that puzzle together. And there will be gaps where you have to basically lean on some inferences and applied assumptions where the level of confidence and leveraging your experiences to sort of like state, right, can we validate this assertion?
Yeah, I all I can say is agreed. There's nothing really I can add or say, that's well said. Well said. There is one last question, which is essentially it's just pretty much like what are some of what are your top 3 books essentially around something like incident response?
Oh, actually, I think 2 of them are sitting right next to me. So I'm going to say Intelligence Driven Incident Response by Scott J. Roberts and Rebecca Brown. Like I know Scott from Penn State. We both went to school. Great book. Awesome book. My other book, like I said, these are like I keep these bad boys close to me. The Defensive Security Handbook, Lee Brotherstone and Amanda Berlin. Great book. Like I said, keep it next to me. And this is a book I just started getting into recently. I haven't really finished it yet, but it's Security Risk Management by Evan Wheeler. It's something that I want to be more declarative and explicit when I talk about how do we measure risk. How do you define elements to measure, and what does that look like for security? We talk about all this data-driven stuff for other like A/B testing and things of that nature. From my experience, I have not seen that translated well into the security space. Most of the times you see people saying, I want red, yellow, green. And every time I hear that, I'm like, okay, like what the hell does that mean? Like, like, okay, oh yeah, red. Okay, yeah, there you go. Like, what does that mean?
Pretty colors. I think that's what that means. No idea.
Like, how do you measure red, yellow, green?
Yeah. There's got to be something behind it. Some facts and some data,
So those would be my books. Yeah, but I also love music too. So I'm going to throw out some music stuff here real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
All right, so right now I would say like "Make Me Believe in You" by Curtis Mayfield. There is a really cool track. There's actually 3 versions of this song. One by Patty Joe, and I can't remember the other lady's name, but I think Curtis Mayfield is the original. It's a cool funk track. Like, and then also, I love James Brown. James Brown and Payback. Like, I just classic funk. And then a Lafayette Afro rock band. All their music is pretty funky. So like, I just love that those rhythms and beats of that the old soul funk. So just throwing that out there for people who want to know more about me. When I did my presentation at Stitch Fix, I said, I was going through the Curtis Mayfield discography, so I got a lot of questions about Curtis Mayfield. So I'm just wrapping that up.
That's all. Well, no, I mean, we've always said, we're like, yeah, you can ask us about AppSec stuff for sure, or just whatever, because this is really just about this podcast. The intention is to kind of just shoot the shit and like make it accessible to everybody who's maybe just getting in to the field or wants to, or just people who've been around. I mean, whatever. We just try to keep it. So this is great because we definitely try to keep it kind of casual and talk about whatever. It doesn't really matter. So I'm just checking chat real quick, make sure we don't have anything else before I. So while I'm checking these, because we did talk about diversity, but I want to know real quick, because I don't think we covered like what can we as a community do to promote females in tech, to promote to make it just in general more inclusive environment, and that barrier a little less intimidating. Because the way I think about it is like, if I'm at a conference and I'm new, well, when I was at conferences and I was new, it's definitely intimidating for anybody to go up to folks you don't know, especially people that are seen as like, super smart rock stars or whatever. So that barrier is already hard for any of us. How do we make it a little bit easier?
All right, so this is gonna be straight to the point here.
Sure.
I think like the whole concept of this whole rock star mentality and this cowboy mentality, like the terminology, I just can't stand it, because I believe that words have meaning. So I try to stay away from using like rock star, because even the association of rock star has a connotation itself. So that's number one. And then number two is, from my experience, what I've noticed is that a lot of underrepresented minorities may just be starting their careers. So there's a level of mentorship, not just mentorship, but lately of sponsorship, to basically to give these individuals positions to actually like showcase their talents and abilities. That's number two. And then number three, if you're in networks, your networks are more than often going to be like yourself. And so when you're already at a disadvantage in terms of like security is such a specialized field within this discipline of engineering, and then within that you're trying to find even specialty backgrounds and diverse individuals, it's even challenging. So I sort of make it an effort to put myself out there more and champion the different groups that are working to sort of pave those inroads. I know that there's groups that I hopefully will be working with in the future around this particular topic. And then the last thing I would say is that as an underrepresented minority, sometimes there's an expectation that it's my job to sort of fill this bucket and carry this bucket on behalf of other of the group at large. And I'm here to say, like, no, that's not my fucking job.
No shit, it's not your job.
So it's collectively as an industry that we will either succeed in this area, and if we believe that that diversity is important, then we will show once again by our actions. Like I am a true believer that if you show me what you do, it will show me the type of person or type of culture that you have. So if your culture or your actions demonstrate that you're going to different places to recruit, like if there's pipeline schools that you always recruit from, and you don't go to potentially like whether Georgia Tech or an HBCU, historically black college or university, then yeah, I'm going to bet to say that you may not get the type of candidate pool that you're thinking of in the first place. And if you're a heavy referral company and you don't have a very diverse population, well, I'm probably going to say you're running the risk that you're probably going to get the same that you see every day. So you have to make it a conscious effort to actually be explicit and declarative about it, period.
Yeah, and it's really the only way that we, again, I don't think people understand the importance of, well, I can't say that, I can't speak for everybody, but I don't know if it's truly understood how important making the field as including as many people who have some fan. I mean, I know there's like there's 20-year-old kids that are just coming out that can do things that and know things that like yeah, I'm not good at. There was that it was like a 20-year-old kid who found the Intel and AMD bugs, right? Like
Yeah.
right. So like how many of those people are out there, and we want them to join. So
No, definitely.
it is for all of our benefit.
Yeah, and just to say, like, I love working with young students and young graduates because their perspective is so fresh that, they challenge me to think about what am I not doing? They see things differently and attack problems differently that is actually refreshing, and also hopefully changing the culture. Like, just a quick story. Like when I first got out to the West Coast, like I like coming from the East Coast. Look, I like to dress. I like to look nice. I like to feel nice. I like
That's
to look
weird in San
good.
Francisco. San Francisco, it's a weirdo. Like,
And I remember working, and someone like made a comment at me about like why you dress like that. I was like, well, I like to look good, I like to feel good. It's not imposing on you or anything like that. And I'm a tall man. I'm about 6'5",
oh
and
wow.
and so I carry myself well and I look good. And it was just the assumption that like you are out of place, and then it made and I felt that, and the whole imposter syndrome thing. I'm not gonna lie, the first year I was out here, I was a mental wreck. um but I found groups and I found people that supported me, and I've made really really great friendships while being out here. But part of the culture to assume that, like, I'm going to be honest, I don't know anything about Star Trek, but people talk to me as if I understand Star Trek. I'm like, is this a security thing? Like what am I supposed to do? Like, there's certain things I think like just there's like an inherent culture that people just believe that if you're a security professional, like you are this quote unquote nerd, and being a nerd consists of these things. And I'm like, well, no, that can't be the case because all of our backgrounds are different. And we can't apply that blanket across everyone. Like I said again, meet people with grace, meet them where they're at, get to know them, and then bring them along for the journey.
Awesome. Well said. I can't really add anything to that. I agree with all of it, and it was really well said. I don't have any other. I don't have any other questions here.
So we did it.
Yeah,
We did it.
Yeah,
We
and
did
I mean,
it.
we've been going for an hour and a half too. Yeah, but I mean, it's great for you to come on, man, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again in the future if you're up for it.
Definitely. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. And also thanks to Justin for like linking us up together. I thought that was amazing. So
Yeah,
I
thanks, Justin.
I appreciate it.
Listening later.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on here, sharing your time with us. We know you're a busy man, and you got a lot going on. So the fact you chose to spend some time with us and our viewers means a lot. So thanks again.
No problem.
Any final words before we anything you wanna mention before we get going and shut this down?
Two things. We're hiring at Stitch Fix, security professionals. Please reach us at follow me on Twitter at Charles_Nwatu, NWATU. Just get a hold of me because we're hiring. And then second, like I said, let's meet each other with grace, get to know each other, and then let's bring people along on the security journey.
Well, again, well said. I encourage anybody who's interested in Stitch Fix to reach out to Charles. Charles Nwatu's handle is twitter.com. Sorry, I'm bringing it. It's Charles_Nwatu. So that's Charles_NWATU. You can follow him on Twitter and you can contact him there as well. So, and we'll put his Twitter handle in the description of this video as well. So, Charles, thanks again. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, don't just hop off yet. But for the rest of you all, we're going to close this out. Have a good night. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.